When we traditionally look at the profiles of mass shooters, it's usually a disgruntled, ostracized, strange, white male. So
that's the perception.
That is the perception.
That's what it is.
Well, and that's historically been the case. You know, when we're looking at all of these school shootings, like from the mass media perspective, right? In terms of how these things are reported or presented, this is the profile. And so they follow up with the narrative of this person was mentally ill. Good afternoon, how are y'all doing?
All right.
Good, well, welcome back to 6 Degrees of Black Mental Health. Today we're gonna be talking about school shootings, and I have a simple question for you guys. Where is Joe Clark in the era of mass school shootings? So, according to the research, in recent years there have been more mass shootings in America than have been reported across the globe. So in this conversation today, we're going to not only address the role that mental health plays in these incidences, but how it connects to the lived experience of the Black community. So in order to delve further into this conversation, let's first discuss the facts, and then we're going to challenge the fallacies about how and why these occur. So we want to start by welcoming Dr. Charles Barrett to the show. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Before we begin, can you just tell us a little bit more about what you do and some of the current concerns when discussing the current school climate?
Sure. I am a school psychologist. I work in 2 elementary schools in Loudoun County and also a middle school. I supervise some interns, do some adjunct work at Howard in their school psych program. This issue of school shootings is certainly significant around the country. We've had our own issues, with school violence in different places, but I think understanding exactly what it is, what it's not, is certainly important, and how can school-based staff working with families and communities really respond to school-based shootings, prevent them whenever we can, also support students as they're in school.
Okay, so what are some of the leading causes of these school shootings?
So I think certainly one of the causes is really the degree to which students feel connected to a school community. Are they valued, respected by their peers, by staff, by their teachers? Certainly mental health is in there. I think some of our past school shooters do struggle with mental health difficulty, but coupled with that is also this larger systemic issue with access to weapons and high-powered weapons, especially that young people have used going back now almost 20 years to Columbine. So we had Columbine, we had Jonesboro, we had Paducah, Kentucky, we had Parkland about a month ago. I think in all those cases, AR-15s were used as the weapon. So we have kids, 14, 15, 17 years old, access to weapons. I think that has to be a part of the conversation as we respond to these, certainly tragic events.
It's interesting that you say that the school shootings have gone back like 20 years. I didn't even realize that it's been that long. But since even like the Columbines and some of the other ones that you named, what have schools been doing? What have school psychologists been kind of like tasked with doing as a result of some of those issues?
Sure. So I think in recent years, there's this, PBIS, positive behavior intervention and support, really creating school climates and school communities that are more inclusive, more positive, more supportive of all kids, using common language to teach expectations. I think threat assessment has been a major improvement, maybe not in every state or every school, but certainly some states like Virginia have been using threat assessment, which really is a process to determine the risk of a violent event happening, between students. So I think those are 2 things that maybe on the preventive side are helpful to try to respond to what we've been seeing, again, almost 20 years. But really beyond that, certainly there's a push for increased access to quality mental health support for students in schools, those who are struggling with anger, anxiety, depression, lack of connectedness. How can we as school-based staff, social workers, psychologists, school counselors really support students in those ways and teaching them to better manage their frustrations?
And I know for me, I think like just hearing about what you're saying, it speaks to really school climate. And I think school psychologists, we do a good job, or are supposed to do a good job of assessing the school climate and making sure that their different pieces are in place that ensures the student's safety and that they feel connected to the school system. So kind of going with the theme, like the lean on me thing, or where's Joe Clark, attitude kind of reflects leadership. So as in your role, how have you worked with other members of the school system administratively to ensure that the school climate is set and is positive?
Well, it's a good question. It's a good question. I think a lot of my practice is really I try to model what I want seen. So I think it may not be direct conversation with a principal or an assistant principal or a counselor or a teacher, but I try to be the type of psychologist who's connected to kids by being visible, not just in the meeting or just in the testing, but in the cafeteria, at bus duty, kind of doing things that may not be associated with that role traditionally, but just seeing that, this guy is here, he works here, but he's a part of the fabric of the school. So I think the more that we become a part of the school culture, the more kids start to feel connected beyond, he's the guy in that room that has a meeting about me every 6 months or every quarter. I think parents see that, and then they start to trust you, with their child. He's not the guy in the child study meeting or the IP meeting telling me what's wrong with my child, but he's connected to us as a community. He understands kind of how we make decisions, challenges in the community. So I think once you do that, it helps to change the perception of who you are as the psychologist, because they see you as more than just the expert coming in to tell them what they've done wrong.
I think I find it pretty interesting, this conversation about school climate. A few years ago, presented some research at Columbia University Winter Roundtable, and the discussion was school climate, but predominantly what we were discussing was the school climate in low-performing schools, primarily populated by African-American youth. And what the studies were showing was that some of the low-performing students were performing low because things that were going on in schools, such as an overrepresentation of security officers, metal detectors when they're coming into the schools, similar to, the Joe Clark movie, Lean on Me, and they're saying, well, these students can't perform to the best of their ability because of these certain things that are, messing up or doing something to the climate of the school. They don't feel safe. It just seems like they're going to jail versus the school. However, you go to these certain schools, such as probably the ones where the recent school shooting occurred, and I don't know if there were an overwhelming number of school resource officers and plainclothes officers and metal detectors when they come in, but yet I think that would be most beneficial for those schools as well. But it seems like it's only being done in the black schools, but more often than not, the black kids aren't coming in and having mass carnage, in their schools.
So I think that leads us into a very important question, too. So when we traditionally look at the profiles of mass shooters, it's usually a disgruntled, ostracized, strange, white male. So
That's the perception.
that is the perception.
That's what it is.
Well, and that's historically been the case. When we're looking at all of these school shootings, like from the mass media perspective, right, in terms of how these things are reported or presented, this is the profile. And so they follow up with the narrative of this person was mentally ill. And so today we want to challenge that a little bit, because I want to know, what is happening in our communities that these things aren't happening, or are they happening and we just don't hear about them?
Right. But before you go, I want to go back and kind of address something that Parnell said, because you mentioned the discussion that you guys had and how there was a lot of these things that are kind of present in the schools of color, and you feel like they would be more beneficial in schools that are more of the majority race. Do you, I guess from the discussion or discourse that occurred, it seems like the stance was that these things need to be removed from the schools. So in your opinion, do you feel like it needs to be in all schools or taken out of schools, period?
I feel like it should be in all schools, because I recognize that black kids have access to weapons as well, and black kids are willing to shoot other young adults, youth, because it shows in the statistics and in the media and everything as well. But also the other schools and the other public schools need it also, because you have these issues where kids are coming into the schools and they're shooting and killing innocent people.
Yeah.
So
you're saying it's not, it shouldn't be based on race or income.
Or
It should really just be as a protective factor for everybody.
Exactly.
Well, I'm wondering, kind of, Dr. Barrett, in terms of kind of like that standpoint, what is like the school psychology perspective on having metal detectors in schools and student resource officers? Is that like more of a federal rollout? Are they looking to kind of do that as far as like protection or preventative measures, or is that?
It's a good topic to explore. I have not heard of any kind of federal rollout as far as metal detectors. I do think that should be a school by school, county by county, state by state kind of thing. But SROs are a huge part of school safety, middle school, high school. The issue that I have with SROs is not so much are they there or are they not there, but their training and how they, again, connect to the school community. So being law enforcement, being, a sheriff, you can't take that same presence, same demeanor into a school building. So I've seen some that are great. They connect to the school, and yeah, they're in uniform, so we know that they're a cop. But how kids respond to them really is a matter of that SRO's ability to connect to the school and know what their role is, which is really to keep kids safe and not really to be the enforcer versus how they might practice in the community. So I think again the issue of SROs and other security measures are important, and I think they should be considered for at least everybody as a preventive measure. But when we get into people and personnel, really it's about the training and the perspective that they bring to that position, how they support students and families.
That's definitely, before we go to that topic, I know we're about to go, but you touched on exactly my part two of the question I asked about connectedness.
Yeah.
Like on an administrative level, I feel like sometimes teachers, resource officers, even principals sometimes, they're not really connected to the community, so they don't understand, the things that go on and what these kids may bring into the school. So, that's a matter of cultural competence.
Yeah.
So if you look at that on just from the administrative side, how are principals, assistant principals, teachers, even all the multidisciplinary teams that we have in place in those schools, how are they being culturally trained to, assess the need for metal detectors, assess the need for, having dogs into the school to check for marijuana? How does training reflect these measures that we put in place so that our kids can be safe?
Well,
guru responses. That's what I'm looking for.
So again, I think even going before training, I think if you look at people as, I'm a member of a staff, a member of this school community, I think it starts before training with relationship. So I think, in schools that I work, a lot of the staff live in the community. The kids go there, they've been there for generations. The new person coming in, a lot of the effectiveness, teacher, principal, psychologist, is forming partnership with people who know the community. For me, it's been parents, it's been sometimes custodians, it's been secretaries that understand the pulse of what happens on Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, because those are the things that I want to know come Monday morning or Thursday morning when kids come to school. If I don't have a pulse on kind of the dynamic of the larger community, then I really can't serve these children and these families appropriately. Loudon is quite a diverse, expansive place. So we have kids in the McMansions, high SCS, very different circumstances than where I work. Lower SCS, primarily Hispanic community, issues of deportation, homelessness, lack of resources, just basic needs, food and things like that. So understanding that about my community, sometimes it came from, the parent liaisons or the secretaries or the custodians that understand kind of who the people are in that community. After you have a sense of that, then certainly there should be some follow-up with some more formalized training on how you respond to people, you know. Go ahead.
I guess because I hear what you're saying, and I also hear your response, and I think it lines up. And I think what I'm hearing or taking away from it is that there needs to be some accountability there for the entire system. And it's kind of not surprising that you won the award for best practice, because I know school psychology talks a lot about homeschool collaboration, and so you're actually modeling that for the administration, for the teachers and all the staff that's in the school. But to Dwayne's point, how is that? How are the other professionals in the school being held accountable for that same standard? Are they? Is the school psychologist responsible for training them to be able to have that pulse there? Do the teachers and the principals have another set of standards or professional practices that they're bound to that kind of covers that? And I don't know if that's a question that you can answer, but
It's a good question. Not officially or not formally. Again, I've worked with principals that they take on that mindset and they have their staff kind of hold them accountable for doing certain things, collaborating, you know, home visits, things like that. But I wouldn't say it's a universal expectation. Something that I certainly have not been involved in on a more systems level, even as far as an expectation for school psychologists to kind of lead that charge to help people get to that place. I work with a social worker who tells me a lot that this stuff is not hard, but you have to care a little bit. And how you care is really showing relationship commitment to the student first, and then moving on to the academics and those other things. But, you know, having never been a classroom teacher, I'm not faced with the stresses of, you know, state tests and evaluation. So I try to be sensitive to that dynamic, to that real view as well. And I had to, it just left me, but it'll come back. But yeah, it's really a matter of relationship, and out of that, I think a lot of these things flow.